we don't know if there was a warning or not. And I think what's very important to understand is this. Sometimes on warnings, the warning may just be given to the player, okay? The warning may just be given to the player. Or also, too, if somebody's offsides, because there's so many receivers, so many guys that come on outside, maybe you don't know who you wanted. And I think Andy them came in. Andy was like, listen, the common courtesy, and they always come to us. Well, they at least will try to notify me. More, usually, the word usually. And I heard commentators like, well, they always come and warn you. They always come and warn you when something's going on. And I just, to me, you could speak to this. Is that something that you always do? Is that something that is always casually given, that courtesy? Does it always go to the coach, or does sometimes that want to go to the player? Or do you give guys leeway to say, okay, look, I've seen you, and I'm not going to call it right now, but we don't know if that warning was given early in the game or not. So I'll let you speak on that.
That's a great point, Jason. And, there's nothing that says you have to give them a warning before you fly. There's nothing in the rule books that says warn them and then flag. It's a courtesy that you do as an official. You try a lot of nonverbal communication with them. You're giving them an okay. You're giving them a head. Yes, you're okay, or no, you better back up. But another thing is you have to be a little bit careful, because now if he's on the line of scrimmage and he's supposed to be in the backfield, and you're telling him back up, and they snap the ball, now you've caused a foul there. So you've got to be careful as an official how you communicate with these players. I can tell you now, I haven't been with them for a few years, but the officials are a little bit different now. They probably don't have the communication skills that they have had in the past. They probably are a little bit more stoic out there. But you try to do as much preventive officiating as you can. Let me tell you, the last thing that any of these officials on Sunday wanted to happen was what happened. They don't want that to happen. But, I think that officials' hands were tied. It was so egregious that Toney was so far offside. And everybody's saying 2 inches or 1 inch. When you can't, you've lined up. You can't, there's a neutral zone. And you got to stay out of that neutral zone. They try to keep that clean. And, if he hadn't been warned, if he had been doing it all along, well, maybe, they need to address that. But I still believe that it was a responsibility of the receiver, and he has to get himself onside, because we can't coach him up on every play.
Right. Okay, it's a good point. I think it kind of moves into the conversation. So you said that is a courtesy. The warning in itself is a courtesy. Okay, and I know you know Andy. You've known Andy for a long time.
Long time. Probably one of the best ever out there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree with you. And so Andy's saying, like, look, we've established a relationship. We understand coaches who've been into the game for a long time, him, Belichick, and those guys who has that the prominence about them. Sometimes it's just like the Jordan rule, right? Some guys who's been here for a long time, you got a little bit more rapport with. That you're like, hey, Andy, listen, there's a guy been lined up all sides. Can you get on him a little bit? Okay, I'm just letting you know somewhat. And I think that's what Andy was so irate about, because he said, well, if this thing has been happening, how come I wasn't warned? And I don't know if he was saying in itself that play in itself, was he warned before that, or he's saying was it prior to the game? And so when it comes out that he was doing it prior to when he did it that time, he's saying, why wasn't I graciously given that warning? Okay.
Well, again, you've got to look at this. And again, I wasn't on the field, and I'm not sure, what transpired, what kind of communication went on out there. But when you've gone 58 minutes, that's not the time to give a warning. At some point you've got to just play. And again, you put yourself in Coach McDermott's place. What's he going to say if they didn't call that, and it's clearly offside, so you're in a tough situation. I know the officials have had a very difficult year, but I'm 100% in agreement with the call that they made in this game on Kadarius Toney.
Yeah. So on Monday night, here's the thing. Monday night, somebody else does it. We see Jalen Waddle, he does it. We see other guys do it throughout the season, and it hasn't been called, right? And I know you said they've been looking at it because you want to try to establish the line of scrimmage, and that's what people are so out of sorts with. Like, oh my gosh, like, look at it here. Look, he's outside. So how come they're not calling it? How come they not calling it? So it gets called in the Chiefs game, and I was trying to explain to someone, like, look, man, there's different officiating crews. They are, and so sometimes when you're looking for consistency, I said this, and I was being funny. I said consistency is asking an official for consistency is almost like asking a politician to tell the truth. You know, I mean, it's.
Well, I hope it's not that bad, Jason. But you're exactly right. I mean, as I said earlier, when I was on the field, and then when I was up in the office, all we really looked for consistency out of officials. They're going to make mistakes. I mean, granted, everybody makes mistakes out there, whether it's a player, a coach, an official. Everybody's making mistakes. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to mitigate those 4 or 5 plays in the game that are just so egregious that you've got to make that call. This is the call that has a big effect on the game. And, but the problem is it's hard for me to say, well, why did they call it on Sunday night and they didn't call it on Monday? And I know people have that problem. That frustrates the fan base. That frustrates them. And all I can say is these officials they're graded, they're scrutinized, they're they are under the microscope every week, and they're not just arbitrarily making calls. They feel very confident in the calls that they make. Do they miss them? Absolutely, they miss them. They've missed them from the first kickoff if they ever played football till ever. I mean, there's always going to be calls missed. But what you try to do is you want the officials to be consistent, and that's what the league is trying to clean up. This line of scrimmage, because as I said, we're letting these offensive tackles back up because they're just getting beat. They can't stop these pass rushers, and the scoring's down, passing's down. So they're going to try to work on that. But again, the officiating aspect of it is, hey, I've got a call to make, and I've got to try to make this call correct. And I'm not sure if that's what the Kansas City fans are looking for, but I hope they understand that it was the correct call and it had to be made, and it wasn't just arbitrarily made. Something went into that with the official.
Yeah. I think it's just not Kansas City fans. Obviously, Kansas City is the one that got the short end of the stick this week on that call in itself. And I'm saying short end. I'm not saying the call was wrong, because it was right. It was the right call. Okay, if he's offsides, he's offsides, right? Period. But I think that's what everybody is like. They're talking about the consistent thing, and you kind of alluded to this too, establishing the line of scrimmage, right? We see this offensive tackles who are getting off. Now, I played the game a whole lot. I could tell when the offensive tackle was fast on the snap. He's out of there before the ball's coming off, right? And I'm not sure if the line judge is seeing it or what's going on. Lane Johnson, obviously, talk about him. We got on Jawan Taylor, who at the very first of the season, it seemed like everybody was saying he was getting picked on. It seemed like he had a bullseye on his back. He's being targeted. And so everybody has an argument that they make in each fan base, right? And that's how it is. So I've seen, the Bills fan base, the Bengals. I'm in Bengals country, if you don't know. I'm in Bengals country because I'm here in Kentucky. So I hear all the time. They're like, oh, well, good for y'all. Y'all finally didn't have it, y'all. So I go back and forth with them. But what about that? I just real quick, just kind of talking about the tackle self and those guys coming off. What about that? Because I know you see it, and I know you could tell the guys are coming off too fast, Jim. I know you can see that.
It is so tight, Jason. It's kind of interesting. When we were evaluating games in New York, we would sit up there and we'd have all our plays looking at them, and it looked like we would have to put it down and put it on the wheel and do it one frame at a time to see. Some of them are just quicker than some linemen are just quicker than the other ones. Some of them beat the snap, and sometimes they don't get called, and that's just that's something that has to be worked on by the league, by the officiating department. But I don't think that's as egregious as the tackles that are back in, that are lining up incorrectly. I think some of these tackles are just quicker than the guards in the center, but they all seem to be getting off. It looks like that leg is coming back before the ball is snapped.
Yes, sir.
And,
yes, sir.
As you're looking down the line, you're trying to pick up the ball, and then you're trying to look at that, to see if he moves, and then you're trying to see if his back leg moves. But it's a tough call. But it's until you've been down on the field, and you've been down on the field, but until you've been there trying to differentiate between what's right and what's wrong and what's a foul and what's not a foul. And at the speed of the game right now, it's so easy for us now as spectators that we can watch it on TV, and then they slow it down for us and they give us 5 or 6 different views of it to see what's going on. But I think for the most part, they talk about the officials are at upwards of 95% correct. And it's probably right. It's unfortunate that 5%, you don't want that. You don't want that 5% against your team. You don't want that 5% to have an effect on the game. But it does. I mean, it happened the week before. I mean, there was an egregious miss on the pass interference.
Right.
What do you do? I mean, it's just. And all of it's a miss, and he missed it. And what do you say? And I thought Mahomes and the Chiefs handled it very professionally, but I see their frustration this week. I see their frustration, but again, does one call determine the outcome of the game? Did one call, did something up? Talk about penalties, drop passes, fumbles. You get all these other issues that go on during the game, and oftentimes they try to limit it or zero in on the one call that, hey, this costs us the game. And, it probably cost you the opportunity to win the game, but I don't think that call cost you the game.
I agree with you. I agree 100%. And that's where I was at, Jim, because I get these things do happen. That's the ebb and flow of a game, right? It is. There's 100 calls that get called, and there's 100 calls that's being missed. And I said, the thing is, why are we in that situation to begin with, right? What happened the first 58 minutes of the game that we didn't get those things done, right? I don't think just one play in itself does, change the course of the game. But that's what everybody's fussing about, right? This is what going into what Patrick said. Patrick Mahomes is sitting there saying, and I know he took it back. There was a lot of frustration there, some other things like that. Hey, why are y'all making these calls at the end of the game? Why make that call at the end of the game? Let the guys play. Let them guys play. And we've seen that, right? We know at the end of the game, you let guys play, especially in the Hail Mary pass, right? You will hardly ever call pass interference. Hardly ever. I don't think I've ever seen a pass interference call unless it's just blatantly, you just pull a guy down before them, right? But what do you think about that? About at the end of the game, like you can't make those calls. Like you got to let the guys play. How do you feel about that?
The game is 60 minutes long, and what we try to tell officials is you have to officiate the first 2 minutes, the middle minutes, and the final minutes of the game exactly the same. Because again, you're trying to get consistent. You want the players to understand what they can do and what they can't do. Now, if you're going to tell them that we're going to let them play the last couple of minutes, there'll be chaos out there, and basically, you've got guidelines, you've got rules to follow. You've got to follow those rules. And it doesn't matter if you're at the beginning of the game or the end of the game. I used to have not a problem, but I used to always tell the officials, if you're going to call holding on the left guard in the first quarter, then call it in the fourth quarter. Or if you're going to let them do it in the first quarter and the second quarter, let them do it in the third and fourth quarter. You've got to be consistent as an official. If you're going to let them get away with it early, you can't let them, you can't let them hold. You can't let him grab a defensive back. You can't let him do all this stuff. And then at the end of the game, throw it on him, and he's going to throw up his hands and say, I've been doing this the whole game. Just like what happened, Tony's been lining up like that the whole game.
Yeah.
You can't do that. It comes down to the consistency. But when it comes to the offside, to me, the offside is the second easiest call to make. The easiest call is if you're under the goalpost calling for an extra point or a field goal. Because all you got to do is look up in the air. And if it goes on inside, it's good. If it goes outside. But offside is easy. I mean, if they beat you, if you can't see the ball, he's blocked you, and he can't be in that neutral zone.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have a question about going back to the Packers game. So after, obviously, the one that everyone's talking about is the MVS pass interference. But the play after that, some people had some comments about the Hail Mary and how that as a whole, that play as a whole, Hail Marys, receivers are getting mugged down there by DBs, and that goes across the board. Why is that play so specifically called differently than most other plays? Because that happens in the second quarter during a game. There's going to be a DPI on that. But Hail Marys, you see that.
The only person in all the years that I worked on the field and in the league office, the only person I ever saw call pass interference on a Hail Mary was Terry McCauley, the current rules analyst for NBC. You know what? He saw a foul and he threw it. We all say, well, we're all going for the ball. They're all doing this. But no, some guys are pushing to get an advantage. And fouls, Jason, as you know, all comes down to advantage, disadvantage.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
And one of the questions, but then you come up with Tony's play. Was there an advantage to that? We don't see an advantage, but he broke the rule. So, it's kind of a problem that you deal with. But in answer to your question, that was pass interference. If you push a guy when he's going to get the ball, if he did it out in the midfield in the first quarter, would that have been a foul? So why is it not a foul at the end of the game?
Yeah.
And they're gonna, you can get all this rigmarole. They're gonna give you all these excuses. Well, we do this, and but is it a foul or it's not a foul, right? And you got to just kind of stand up and we missed it.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out the best clips from Chief Concerns. And if you prefer to listen to the show, subscribe and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.